Hello there you beautiful people, and welcome to this video all about file extensions in Linux. Now, on operating systems such as Windows, file extensions allow you to tell what type of file that you're dealing with at a glance. For example, we know that files with names ending in .txt are text files, and files with names ending in .jpg or .png are likely to be images. But in Linux, file extensions usually don't matter, and the system tends to look at the contents of the file rather than just its name. But sometimes file extensions really do matter. So in this video, we're going to take a bit of a deep dive into understanding file extensions in Linux and shine some light onto their strange behavior. And by the end of the video, you'll know what freedoms the Linux operating system gives you when naming your files, what interesting things can happen and what you need to be aware of. Oh, and you'll also have a new command in your toolkit that will help you when dealing with files on your file system. So this is all very useful stuff, very exciting stuff. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright, so I've gone ahead and put some files here on my desktop. First of all, I've got an image of Tux, the traditional penguin logo for Linux here, in PNG format. Now Tux, in case you're interested, is short for the word tuxedo, which is a fancy type of black and white suit usually worn by waiters and poshly dressed people at high-class parties. Now penguins are said to look like they're wearing little tuxedos because of their black and white colouring, and that's where Tux gets his name, from the word tuxedo, in case you were interested. But besides a picture of the lovely Tux here and random trivia, I've also got a text file here with some Shakespeare in it called shakespeare.txt, and I also have a spreadsheet file with some random numbers in it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the file command to see how Linux handles file types. So if I go ahead and open a terminal using the Control Alt and T keyboard shortcut and just drag it a bit out of the way so we can still see the files, I'm going to introduce you to a new command called the file command. Now the file command will tell us basically what type of file that we are dealing with. So for example, if we try to have a look at Tux here, if we do file tux.png, we actually need to go to our desktop first. So let's shift over to our desktop, clear the screen and do file Tux, and I can actually just so you see, I can actually just with TU go ahead and press tab and it will auto fill that as well, just showing you that tab auto completion works perfectly fine for file names just like it does for folders. So it's a great thing that we learned in the last video. Okay, so let's have a look. File of tux.png, and it will tell us that this is PNG image data. It'll tell us the size of the file and loads of other stuff as well. Okay, but it tells us the file type. Okay, now if I rename tux.png, okay, if I rename this to tux.jpg, okay, which is another type of image file, okay, you can see that it's been renamed there. But now let's do that again. Okay, let's try file of tux.jpg and let's see what happens. Now you can see here that it still says that it is a PNG file. Now this is important, point number one. In Linux, file extensions don't matter. Okay, unlike Windows, Linux doesn't determine file type using the file extension, but instead it reads a piece of code inserted at the top of every file. Now that piece of code is known as a header, and it serves as a kind of label for Linux to read, and when Linux reads that label, it knows the file type. So changing just the name of the file won't make a difference because that file header won't have changed. Okay, so here we have some Shakespeare script in text format. So if I open that up, you can see that there is plenty of text in there, which I just copied and pasted from Romeo and Juliet. Okay, so because that's the kind of stuff that I do. So when we check the file type we have here, if we do file shakespeare.txt, it'll tell us that it is an ASCII text file. Okay, but now if I try to turn this into a PDF, so if I rename it and try to say, okay, this is now shakespeare.pdf, okay, and I rename it. Now the system, it appears to have changed the icon, right? It looks like that's a PDF file. But if I try to run the file command again, file shakespeare.pdf, it still tells us that it's ASCII text. So Linux read the header of the file and saw that it was still a text file. But what happens when we try to open it? Because it looks like the system thinks it's a PDF because you can see the logo's changed, but it's still telling us that it's a text file. What's going on there? Why does it think it's different? Well, if we try to open it, what happens? Well, now we get an error, okay? We see that the default program to open files with names ending in .pdf is a PDF reader. And when we try to open this file in the PDF reader, we get an error from the program as it's trying to open our file as a PDF file. And what the system basically did is say, that's a file that ends in .pdf. It's probably a PDF file. So let me be helpful and allow the user to open it in a PDF viewer. Now, obviously, a PDF reading program isn't designed to read text files. It's designed to read PDFs, and that's what's causing the issue here. Now, this is important. This is an important distinction to make. Important point number 2, although the operating system will know what file format the actual file is by reading the header, the extra programs that are installed on top of the operating system, such as this PDF viewer, are trying to open the files that might require certain formats or other file extensions in order to work. So what's happening is to make this automatically want to open as a PDF, it just saw the file name. It just looked at the file name, but the content is still text. And it says here, file type plain text is not supported. But the program got tricked. It saw the file name, and that's why it wanted to open it as a PDF. If I rename it back to text, just change the text, change that back, you'll see now that it will open fine as a text file. Okay, so that's the important distinction to make there. The programs that are installed on top of the operating system, such as PDF viewers and stuff like that, they might need the file to have a specific file extension in order to open them, but the operating system itself does not care. So let's see this in a bit more detail. If I take a look at the spreadsheet, here it's called data.ods. If I do file of data.ods, okay, it says that it's an ODS file, which stands for Open Document Spreadsheet. Okay, now this means we can open it up in LibreOffice Calc, which is basically the Linux version of Microsoft Excel, okay, or the Apple equivalent. It's like this spreadsheet program, okay, and it's got a few numbers in there, okay. But now if I close the spreadsheet and rename that, for example, to a .txt file, okay, so if I rename it to data.txt, rename that, okay, you can see that now it wants to be opened up in a .txt format. Okay, and now I try to open that up in LibreOffice Calc. So if I click up here, I type Calc, and it comes up. I click LibreOffice Calc, wait for that to boot up, go on File, Open, go to my desktop, so Home and then Desktop, and then try to open up data.txt. You can see now that we've got all kinds of problems happening here. Okay, so if I try to just open it like that, let's try and click OK. We're going to get an error, okay? And this is because the .txt file extension is fooling LibreOffice Calc. LibreOffice Calc made the mistake of reading the file extension and trying to open the file as a .txt file, okay? Whereas the actual content, as we can see here, is a spreadsheet file. It's not a text file, okay? But if we rename that back and we rename it so that it's data.ods, now it will open fine. So this is the important distinction that we need to make. I'm going to hammer this home. The file extension isn't important to the Linux operating system, but it might be important to the software packages that we install on top of Linux. So do bear in mind that don't give your file names really weird file extensions that don't match their content, because it might confuse third-party software that is installed, okay, even though you don't necessarily have to. Okay, so let's give the spreadsheet a completely, now let's try something else. Let's see something quite interesting. Let's give the spreadsheet a completely made up file extension. So if I call it spreadsheet.shablam, okay, I'll call it spreadsheet.shablam. Now, isn't that interesting? Notice how it automatically still wants to open it up in the spreadsheet software. Now, we notice here that we didn't fool the software, and it still knows it's an ODS file, and we can actually open it up. If I just go ahead and double click that, it's going to open up perfectly fine. And you see we've got our data in here, no funny business this time. So why can it open up a weird file name but not a simple one like .txt? Well, the reason is the software just simply didn't recognize the .shablam file extension, so it might have looked to the operating system to help determine the file type instead. But when we called it a .txt file, when we actually named it directly to be .txt, The software thought it would be a bit clever, and it thought, aha, I know how to deal with this, and it made a little bit of a shortcut to itself and was like, I'm just going to open this automatically as a txt file. But that assumption was wrong in this case because the content is a spreadsheet. We just named it .txt, and that caused the program to throw an error when it found out it wasn't a txt file after all, but actually was a spreadsheet. Now, the bottom line is that you have a lot of freedom to name files whatever you want in Linux. You can even call them, you can even give them file extensions like .shablam, which of course you couldn't do in any other operating system. This is common for having files, for example, if I just try and copy and paste this, if I copy and paste this file, you might have a backup. You might, for example, call one file an original. So you'd say, okay, I'm going to call this one .orig, and then I'd call this one, maybe I'd call another one .back, or I copy it and call it .copy or something like that. Okay, and this is how you might name your file. So I'd be like, this is the original, this is the copy. I can see just by looking at the file name without it actually affecting the way the system works. So this is sometimes used to allow people to read file extensions that are a lot more human readable than things like .ods or whatever. Okay, but just make sure that if you name your files in such a way, don't give them file names that might confuse the software that you expect to open them, because not all softwares like to play ball with strange file names. Okay, so that will bring our discussion of Linux file extensions to a close. So as a summary of what you learned in this video, you learned that you can use the file command to know for sure what type of file that you're dealing with, and you learned that file extensions aren't important to the Linux operating system, which means you can name files whatever you want. Yes, even .shablam. But while you're doing that, make sure you try not to confuse third-party software that might need to open the file, because it might be expecting specific file extensions. And if you try to confuse it, then you'll just get errors in a very, very bad time. So coming up next, in the next video, we're going to take your command line skills to a whole new level by looking at the concept of wildcards. So let's say you had a really messy desktop and you wanted to move all of your images to one folder and all of your PDFs to another folder and all of your spreadsheets and Office files to another folder using the command line. How can you use a command that's actually so specific? Well, you can do that using wildcards. Wildcards allow you to make your commands really, really specific and also really general, thereby allowing you to level up your control over what commands actually operate on. Now, this is an incredibly useful ability when dealing with files, so for another dose of epic superpowers, I'll see you in the next video.